The alien fleet hung in the darkness like a crown of steel and fire, its hundreds of warships drifting with the calm arrogance of predators at rest. Admiral Varix lounged in his command throne, claws tapping against the armrest as though the conquest of another world were nothing more than a tedious formality. The great viewport before him displayed the ruin of another human colony, its cities burning in neat, geometric scars across the planet's surface. The colony's defense grid had folded in minutes, the last resistance broadcast cut short by a single beam that sliced the ground open like soft clay. Efficient, Varix muttered, though there was no pride in his voice. Efficiency was expected. He wanted spectacle, terror, the kind of resistance that would make a victory worth remembering. Instead, the human screamed briefly, then vanished. He tilted his head toward his officers, letting his boredom show. This species dies too quickly. His second-in-command, an officer with polished tusks and sharp ambition, gave a soft laugh. Perhaps they are grateful for the release. A species that builds fragile huts on fragile rocks deserves no better. Around the bridge, a ripple of amusement spread. Varix allowed it, but his gaze lingered on the tactical displays. Humanity, for all its fragility, had multiplied across the stars faster than anyone had expected. Their colonies dotted unclaimed sectors, sprouting like weeds in rich soil. And yet, every time his fleet descended, they shattered with barely a pulse of resistance. Vermin, perhaps, but vermin with unnerving persistence. A junior sensor officer hesitated before speaking, his voice almost lost in the hum of machines. Admiral, if I may, these humans, they adapt quickly. Every world has different tactics, different shields, different weapons. It is unusual. The bridge went still for a breath, then laughter thundered through the chamber. The idea of humans as innovators was absurd. Varix's tusked deputy barked. Unusual? They die the same every time. That is their only consistency. Varix's mouth curled in a faint smile, but his eyes hardened. He respected loyalty, not complacency. Careful with your observations, Ensign, he said quietly. Truth sounds like dissent to the wrong ears. The warning was subtle, yet the officer flinched and returned to his post. The fleet reassembled and began its slow push toward the next target. The scouts had already reported on it, a lush, blue-green world heavy with oceans and atmosphere. To Varix it sounded almost quaint. Humans had named it Earth. He considered the irony of a species clinging so tightly to one rock when they were scattered across dozens. His deputy scoffed at the report. A central nest, perhaps? Burn it, and the rest will scatter. Or resist harder, Varix countered, though his tone was dry. He thrived on challenge, but he no longer expected it from this species. The humans had disappointed him too often. Still, the thought of crushing their homeworld had a certain satisfaction, a finality. If nothing else, it would end the monotony. As the fleet neared the Sol system, anticipation, or perhaps simple restlessness, hung over the officers. They whispered of easy glory, of the honor of being the ones to finally stamp out humanity's cradle. Some wagered how long Earth's defenses would last. The estimates ranged from hours to days. None spoke of weeks. None imagined defeat. When Earth came into view, the bridge filled with a hush of admiration, though not respect. Oceans glittered, continents sprawled with visible scars of industry and habitation. A living world, fragile and bright. The perfect example of prey dressing itself in pride. Pretty, one officer remarked, leaning forward. Almost a shame. Not a shame, Varix corrected. A warning to the rest of the galaxy. Defiance ends in ash. His claws clicked against the command throne again, betraying the faintest trace of hunger for what was to come. He raised one arm. Prepare the strike. The command rippled outward, and the fleet bristled with energy. Engines roared, weapons spooled, the void trembled with imminent violence. Yet, before the order to fire was given, a voice intruded across their comm systems. It was not frantic, not desperate. It carried no trace of fear. This is Earth Command. The transmission was flat, almost emotionless. Cease hostilities. This is your only warning. The bridge erupted in laughter, and the sound was louder than any weapon's fire. Officers doubled over, claws clicking against consoles, their bodies shaking with mirth. One of them gasped, "They threaten us? With what?" "Rocks." Even Varix chuckled, though his gaze lingered on the projection. The voice had been calm, unnervingly so. No bluster, no begging. Just a statement, almost routine. He dismissed the flicker of unease. "Humans are good at pretending," he said with a sneer. "But it changes nothing. Fire." The order went out, and lances of plasma screamed toward the planet's surface. For a moment, satisfaction swelled. For a moment, it seemed another victory would be written in fire. Then the weapons vanished, swallowed whole by brilliant, silent spheres that blossomed in Earth's orbit. The plasma bolts disintegrated as though erased from existence. An instant later, massive structures blinked into view, unfolding from folds of space like shadows stepping into light. Platforms, weapons arrays, fleets that had not been there a heartbeat before. The bridge fell silent. Varix's deputy stared, tusks trembling. "Admiral, their defenses, those are not." The same calm voice cut in again, echoing through every channel, every system, even the private circuits the aliens trusted most. "You have been warned. Leave now, and you may survive. Continue, and you will not." For the first time in a long career of conquest, Varix felt the steady beat of his heart's falter. He had sought spectacle. He had sought challenge. He had not expected to find it here, at the cradle of a species his empire had already written off as weak. His claws tapped once more against the throne, but this time the sound was hollow. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. And though the fleet still hung ready to strike, though his officers still clung to arrogance like armor, a seed of fear had been planted. It rooted itself in silence, in the stillness before the storm, where even the predator realized that perhaps he had stepped into the den of something older, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous than prey. The first salvos had been meant to scorch the planet's surface, but the beams dissolved into nothingness, stripped apart by fields the alien empire had never witnessed before. The silence on Admiral Varix's bridge was suffocating. He could hear the labored breaths of his officers, the faint scrape of claws against consoles. None dared to speak. Then the humans answered, not with gloating, not with pleading, but with precision. From the void above Earth, weapons arrays unfolded like blades from hidden scabbards. Dozens of platforms emerged in silent unison, forming a lattice of light and steel. Their design was unlike anything in the Empire's archives. No ornamentation, no wasted curves, only function. Cold, clean, and absolute. The first barrage struck before the alien fleet could react. 3 cruisers vanished instantly, cut apart with surgical beams that entered at one end and exited at the other, leaving nothing but drifting carcasses. There had been no warning, no lock-ons, no chance to counter. Varix gripped the arms of his throne, his tusks grinding. "Report," he demanded, his voice taut. The sensor officer's hands trembled as he struggled to answer. "Admiral, the weapons. Our scans show no emissions. No buildup. They appear invisible until they fire." "Impossible," Varix growled, but even he felt the brittle edge of disbelief in his words. The human struck again, and another ship folded inward, its hull imploding as if the very fabric of space had betrayed it. The crew's screams echoed briefly through the fleet channels before being cut off. Across the bridge, Varix's deputy turned, his bravado gone. "They were waiting for us." The Admiral did not respond. His gaze remained locked on the unfolding slaughter. He had seen ambushes before, but this was different. There was no chaos, no randomness. Every human strike was deliberate, exact. Not a shot wasted. Not a movement unmeasured. Then the human transmission returned. The same voice. The same unshaken calm. "Withdraw now. This is your final chance." The words were delivered with such detached certainty that they felt heavier than any threat screamed in anger. It was not rage that unsettled Varix, nor desperation. It was the chilling sense that the human spoke from a position of absolute control. "Continue firing. Varric snapped, unwilling to show fear before his officers. The order went out, and the alien fleet spat fire at the Earth once more. This time, the response was immediate. The hidden platforms flared, and an invisible wall erupted between Earth and its attackers. The plasma fire scattered like sparks against water. From behind that shield, human ships emerged, sleek, angular, their engines burning white. They did not rush into combat. They advanced in steady lines, each movement coordinated as though choreographed. Varric's deputy whispered what many were already thinking. This is not desperation. This is discipline. In his private quarters later, the Admiral replayed the recordings alone. He forced himself to watch as human ships dismantled his fleet with quiet brutality. He slowed the footage, studied the precision, the timing. There was no joy in their movements, no indulgence. Every strike was delivered with a cold certainty of survival. He accessed the Empire's intelligence archives on humanity. What had been dismissed as scattered notes and trivial observations now took on a darker weight. Wars that spanned continents. Weapons that poisoned skies and burned cities to ash. Civilizations rebuilt after collapse, only to rise and destroy each other again. Humanity did not merely fight wars. They had been shaped by them. He watched images from Earth's own history. Explosions flattening cities. Soldiers marching across ruined fields. Crowds screaming, then falling silent under gunfire. Not all the battles were interstellar, not even close. They were human against human, war after war after war. And each time, the humans endured. The Admiral leaned back, suddenly aware of the pressure in his chest. He had mocked the species as fragile, soft, scattered. Yet here they stood, unyielding at the edge of annihilation, revealing power not in the flourish of empire, but in the cold mathematics of survival. For the first time in years, fear slid its claws into him. Still, he was not the only one faced with this revelation. Across the Empire's capital, the High Council convened in emergency session. Reports of the Earth engagement had spread faster than sensors could contain them. Councilors bickered across the chamber, their jeweled garments swaying as their voices rose. "This is a minor setback," one roared. "Primitive tricks. A few lost ships mean nothing to the might of our empire." "Minor?" another spat. Dozens of warships erased in seconds. Their homeworld armed beyond anything we calculated. This was no improvisation. This was a trap set generations in advance. Varric stood before them, summoned to deliver his testimony. The chamber lights reflected off his scales as he bowed, then straightened. His voice was steady, but every syllable carried the weight of what he had seen. "Counselors, we erred. The humans are not prey. They are predators who have hidden their claws. What you witnessed was not desperation but design. They anticipated us. They prepared for us." Some scoffed openly. "You let fear cloud your judgment. They're still a backward species, unfit for the stars. Our fleet is vast. They cannot withstand it." "They do not need vastness," Varric countered. "They need only patience." Every move they made at Earth was calculated, as though they had studied us for centuries. They will not meet us in open battle where strength decides. They will bleed us, quietly, until nothing remains. His words stirred unease in the chamber, though pride fought against it. Leaders who had known only domination struggled to accept the notion of true resistance. One counselor rose, her voice cold as steel. "Then we crush them before they can spread further. Deploy the Grand Armada. End this infestation at its root." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, and Varric felt a weight settle on him. He recognized the arrogance, the blindness. The same pride that had led them to Earth would now drag them further into peril. He bowed his head, concealing the grim twist of his mouth. They would not listen. They could not. To admit humanity's strength was to admit the Empire's weakness, and that was unthinkable. When the session ended, orders were already being drawn. The largest fleet in living memory would be assembled. Humanity would be annihilated in one overwhelming strike. Varric walked the silent corridors afterward, his claws echoing softly against the polished stone. He carried himself with the posture of loyalty, but his mind replayed the calm human voice, those simple words. Withdraw now. This is your final chance. And though his empire demanded his obedience, though the armada's construction would proceed regardless of his warnings, he knew something had shifted within him. He had stared into the eyes of a species his kind had mocked as vermin, and he had glimpsed something terrifying there. Not weakness. Not desperation. Patience. The kind of patience that turns survival into strategy and strategy into inevitability. And for the first time in his long career, Admiral Varix wondered if he was marching not toward victory, but toward the extinction of his own people. The Council's decision was final, and the orders reverberated across the Empire like a war drum. Worlds that had not seen mobilization in centuries bled resources into shipyards. Dockyards burned with activity, birthing vessels the size of continents, each bristling with weapons meant to cow entire sectors into silence. The Grand Armada was proclaimed as the ultimate answer to human insolence. No dissent was tolerated. To question the plan was to question the Empire itself. Admiral Varix obeyed, as he always had. He stood in the great hangar halls, watching ship after ship take form. The pride of his people gleamed in polished hulls, the arrogance of supremacy carved into every line. Officers bustled past him, speaking in clipped tones about logistics, about formations, about how long it would take to overwhelm a single fragile world. Their words sounded hollow in his ears. On the command deck of his flagship, he kept his doubts hidden. He projected certainty to his crew, though his mind replayed the images of Earth's defense again and again. He remembered the calm human voice, the precision of their strikes, the way they had erased ships without leaving wreckage. Every instinct in him screamed that they were walking into a trap greater than any they had imagined. Yet duty was iron. To refuse would mean dishonor and execution. So he waited, silent, as the tide of inevitability pulled him forward. The Armada surged from the Empire's core in a blaze of glory, thousands of ships filling the void. Entire stars dimmed under their collective presence. The spectacle was intoxicating. Even those who feared humanity whispered that no world could stand against such power. The fleet was a wall of steel and fire, a testament to millennia of dominance. The Empire believed it was unstoppable. Yet the humans did not wait for it to arrive. The first wormhole opened in the dark space beyond the Empire's borders, a terror in reality itself. From its depths poured vessels of unfamiliar design, smaller than the Empire's Leviathans, but faster, sharper. They did not seek open confrontation. They struck supply convoys, shredded communication relays, crippled outposts, then vanished back into the dark. No broadcasts accompanied the attacks. No speeches or claims of glory. Only silence, punctuated by surgical destruction. Reports filtered into Varix's flagship, each one a reminder of what he already knew. The humans were not fighting for conquest. They fought like hunters, striking where it hurt, then disappearing before retaliation could land. The Admiral recognized the strategy instantly. It was how predators broke prey larger than themselves. Cut the arteries. Wait for weakness. Finish the kill. The Council refused to see it. From their gilded chambers, they sent messages of fury. Find them. Crush them. Make the galaxy watch as we erase their kind. Pride blinded them to the truth. They did not realize the humans had already shifted the battlefield into one the Empire could not dominate. Weeks turned into months as the Armada pressed onward, bleeding strength without ever facing the enemy head-on. Ships vanished into ambushes. Fleets arrived at rendezvous points only to find them empty, their signals jammed, their fuel drained by sabotage. And through it all, Earth remained untouched, its silence heavier than any declaration of war. When the humans finally revealed themselves, it was not with grand ceremony, but with inevitability. Varix's sensors screamed as wormholes tore open across the Empire's lines. Human fleets poured through, each movement synchronized with chilling precision. They emerged not where the Empire expected them, but where they were least defended. Rearguard positions collapsed in hours. Entire wings of the Armada were cut off, isolated, destroyed before they realized they had been abandoned. On the bridge, Varix watched the chaos unfold. The humans moved with a discipline his people had never seen. Their ships did not hesitate, did not panic, did not scatter. Each acted as part of a greater whole, coordinated not for spectacle, but for certainty. They struck and vanished, never wasting a moment. His deputy, once so arrogant, now leaned forward with wide eyes. "Admiral, they are everywhere." "How can they be everywhere?" Varix answered softly, though his words carried more dread than he intended. "Because they prepared for this. Because they studied us while we mocked them." The humans pressed their advantage without mercy. Drones flooded battlefields, autonomous fleets cutting through larger vessels with mechanical precision. Saboteur craft infiltrated supply depots and detonated them from within. Even when the Empire's ships scored kills, it felt empty. The humans had already withdrawn, their real forces waiting elsewhere. For the first time, the Empire's armada hesitated. Morale cracked. Ships defected or fled. Rumors spread like fire. Whispers of human tactics, of battles lost before they began, of an enemy that fought as though they had already seen the future and mapped its every turn. The Council's broadcasts grew frantic, demanding obedience, promising victory. Their words rang hollow against the silence of the battlefield. Varix stood in his command throne, watching another wing of the Armada collapse under human assault. He should have felt anger. Instead, he felt something colder. Respect, perhaps. Terror, certainly. Humanity's strategy was not loud, not glorious. It was inevitable, like the tide wearing down stone. He understood now why their voice had been so calm. On the outer edge of the battle, the Admiral's flagship shook as another wave of human strikes pierced the fleet. Consoles sparked, alarms howled. Officers shouted over one another. The Empire's greatest force, assembled at unimaginable cost, was unraveling before his eyes. "Admiral," his deputy said, voice low and broken. "What do we do?" Varix's claws dug into the armrests of his throne. He wanted to say fight. He wanted to say endure. Instead, he looked at the chaos, the shattered fleets, the unrelenting human advance, and he whispered the only truth left. "We survive. If we can." The words left a bitter taste in his mouth, but they carried a clarity he had not felt since Earth. He finally understood that the Empire's reign had ended the moment it had mistaken humanity for prey. Everything since had been the slow, brutal unfolding of that mistake. As the humans tightened their net, closing in with the same silence that had unnerved him months ago, Admiral Varix leaned back and let the truth sink into his bones. Victory was no longer possible. Only survival remained. And even that was not guaranteed. The empire that had once stretched across the stars was crumbling, not with the roar of triumph or the fire of noble last stands, but with the quiet inevitability of collapse. World by world, its fleets faltered, its governors panicked, and its citizens whispered of humans as though speaking their name aloud might summon them. The Grand Armada, heralded as unstoppable, was now nothing more than drifting wreckage and fleeing survivors. What little resistance remained was scattered, brittle, terrified. Admiral Varix's flagship drifted among the ruins of another shattered formation. Its hull was scarred, its crew exhausted, but it still lived where countless others had been extinguished. Reports trickled in surrenders, of planets raising white signals in hopes that humanity would pass them by. The Empire's core worlds, once untouchable, were now vulnerable, and everyone knew it. Varix stood on his bridge, watching the stars flicker against the darkness. He had commanded fleets that enslaved entire civilizations, yet for the first time, he felt the weight of being the conquered. The silence of his officers told him they felt it too. Their arrogance had drained away long ago, leaving only hollow discipline. They looked to him not for victory, but for direction, for some fragment of hope that survival was still possible. When the humans arrived, they did not come in a wave of fire. They appeared with quiet certainty, their ships sliding from the folds of space like phantoms, surrounding his vessel without firing a shot. The formation was perfect, disciplined, almost ceremonial. Varix could not decide whether it was a gesture of respect or a demonstration of power. A voice filled the bridge, the same voice he had first heard above Earth.
Calm.
Steady. Unshaken. Admiral Varix, your fleet is broken. Your empire cannot recover. You may surrender, or you may be destroyed. Choose. His officers flinched, eyes turning toward him. In their gazes he saw fear, but also something else, relief. They were tired of running, tired of dying. He realized then that the humans had already won, not only by fire and steel, but by unraveling the will of their enemies. He straightened in his throne, his pride whispering to resist, to make one final gesture of defiance. Yet, even as the thought formed, he knew it was hollow. He had witnessed their efficiency, their patience, their refusal to waste even a single movement. To resist now would not be valor. It would be waste. This empire does not surrender, one of his officers muttered bitterly. Varix ignored him. He looked at the human fleet on his display, silent and waiting, and understood that mercy was the only gift they offered. He exhaled slowly, as if releasing the last fragments of the Empire's arrogance from his chest.
We yield, he said.
His voice was quiet, but it carried through the comms. This fleet surrenders. The silence afterward was immense. Then the human voice responded, unchanged. Acknowledged. You and your crew will live. Prepare to receive boarding parties. Compliance will ensure survival. The channel closed. The humans did not gloat. They did not sneer. They accepted surrender as though it were a routine procedure. That absence of emotion chilled Varix more than any threat could have. They had no need for fury. They had already decided the shape of the future. When the human officers stepped aboard, Varix studied them carefully. They were not imposing in stature, not monstrous in appearance. Yet there was something in their eyes, an intensity, a weight, that unsettled him. These were beings who carried the memory of endless wars within them, not as scars, but as instincts. Predators wearing the guise of diplomats. He expected chains, humiliation, perhaps execution. Instead, the human commander addressed him with unnerving composure. You will not be executed, Admiral. You will serve. Your people need order, and you will help provide it. Resist, and you will vanish with the rest of your empire. Comply, and you may guide what remains into survival. The words struck deeper than any blade. To be spared was no mercy, it was a binding. The humans were not offering freedom. They were offering control. He was to become the instrument of their order, a survivor repurposed. For a long moment, Varix said nothing. His pride rebelled, but his pragmatism held firm. He thought of the billions under his command, the civilians across his empire who would die screaming if humanity chose vengeance. If he could bend, perhaps they could live. At last he nodded. Then I will serve, not for your sake, but for theirs. The human commander inclined his head, as though the outcome had never been in doubt. That is sufficient. In the days that followed, Varix watched as humanity reshaped the balance of the galaxy. Their fleets moved with quiet dominance, not conquering for glory, but dismantling power with surgical efficiency. Former subjects of the Empire rushed to align themselves with Earth's new order, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. No one dared challenge them. The humans did not revel in victory, but their silence carried a weight heavier than celebration. Among his own people, unrest brewed. Some called him a traitor, others a coward. Yet the more pragmatic voices knew the truth. Without surrender, they would all be dead. Better to live under a human shadow than to be erased entirely. One evening, in the solitude of his new quarters, Varix stared at the stars and allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He remembered the first colony he had burned, the first human he had dismissed as insignificant, the first warning he had ignored. It all seemed distant now, like the arrogance of another lifetime. The humans had never sought war, not truly. But when war came to them, they embraced it with a cold inevitability. They fought not for conquest, but for survival, and in that purpose they became unstoppable. The Admiral whispered to the void, a confession meant for no ears but his own. "We thought you were prey. We thought you were fragile. But you were patient. You waited. And now, the galaxy belongs to you." On Earth, leaders spoke of unity, of vigilance, of a future no longer bound by fear. They did not raise banners of empire. They raised the specter of inevitability. Humanity had been underestimated, dismissed, mocked. Now it stood awakened, united, and outward-looking. And in the silent corridors of captured ships, in the whispers of defeated empires, one truth spread like wildfire. Humanity had stopped pretending to be civilized. The stars themselves seemed to shiver at the realization that the predators of Earth had finally stepped onto the galactic stage.